Hey, what's the world record for continuous Angry Birds gameplay? Because I think I might have set the world masters record last week on a flight from Rome to Toronto. That's right, kids. I went to Italy, had a good time, drank some fine wine, saw some cool stuff, man. And I'll tell you all about it on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. It's worse than I thought, kids. The epidemic is worse. It's far beyond worse. It's beyond even my wildest imagination. Not the pandemic, not talking about the pandemic based on my experience. You know, apart from masks on public transportation, the pandemic is a thing of the past. But the epidemic, kids, the epidemic that people aren't talking about is alive and well and thriving and somewhat frightening, all right? I am talking about the selfie epidemic. I had no idea. I mean, I travel around, all right? The last 5 or 6 years, I spent a lot of time in Europe on the road playing shows, crisscrossed Canada playing shows. I've been down to the States to play shows. I've been around, man, and I have not noticed this. And the reason is that when you're on the road in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Austria, in the Czech Republic, you don't tend to be in places that are real tourist traps, okay? When you're on the road, at least at the level I was playing, you know, you're playing the neighborhood pub in some little town in Germany that nobody's ever heard of, that's breathtaking and beautiful, and we should all go, but we don't. Or you're in Holland, or you're wherever, but you're not playing a lot of big tourist places. You're playing the real places. You know what I mean? You're playing the cities where people work, where they grow up, where they live, you know, proper German, Dutch, whatever, lives. You're not typically in cities that are huge tourist traps. And I gotta tell you, man, having spent the last 10 days or so in two of the biggest tourist traps in Europe, those being Rome and Florence, Italy, I was shocked, stunned, and more than a little dismayed to see how much freaking selfie culture dominates. I couldn't believe this, and I still can't kind of believe it, man. You know what I'm talking about? I am talking about people who exist, it seems, just to take selfies, just to take photos of themselves in famous places so that they can put them on the gram and they can get famous too. Dude, I had no freaking idea, but you see this everywhere you go. You go to the Trevi Fountain, you go to the Spanish Steps, you go and stand in front of the statue of David, and you should be gaping in awe, but what you see is not the sort of awe inspiration that you might expect. You have a sort of awe of macabre, if you will, when you look and you see people lining up to do the perfect selfie to get themselves on the gram. And I don't want to stereotype this. But I saw some patterns, okay? Your typical culprit, your typical perp, a young girl, woman, usually pretty attractive, dressed to the freaking nines to go out touristing, dressed to the nines, standing in front of some famous monument, piece of art, whatever, something recognizable. And then you watch this process where typically she does like the hair tussle, the flip, get it all just perfect, you know, and then hold out the phone to just the right height to get that whatever angle it is. I'm not a selfie expert. get the right angle, get herself in the frame just so, and then begin to make all the faces, man. Pouty face, duck face, cutesy smile, stick her little butt out, do that one, then turn around and do the shoulder one. This whole series, you watch them do it and you're like, what am I looking at right now? Or they've got a partner in crime. They're standing wherever they are just to get the perfect selfie in front of the, Leaning Tower of Pisa, whatever. And they've got an accomplice who's down on the ground shooting up or shooting here, and they're lifting their little butt, and they're doing the hair toss, and they're doing the cutesy smile, and they're doing the pouty face. They're standing in front of the Roman Coliseum. People died in there, man. There were public executions in there. Animals were tortured in there for sport, for entertainment. Selfie girls don't care, don't know, don't want to know. What matters to selfie girls is that they are seen in front of this famous thing. It's not about the famous thing anymore. People used to go on vacation and they would take a photo of the statue of David. And they would be like, can you believe this freaking thing? This is one of probably the most famous statue in the history of the world. It is an artistic marvel, an unbelievable accomplishment. It is huge. You've seen it in books and on TV your whole life, and then you're standing in front of it, and you should be in awe of that, but you're not, because the real work of art is me. Look at me. Everybody pay attention to me. Look at my cute face. Look at how pretty I am. Oh, yes, there's a statue here as well, but look at me. I'm the work of art. Am I overthinking this? Am I reading too much into this? It was everywhere. It's like a pestilence. Everywhere you go. It's not just girls, but that seems to be the stereotype. Just lining up to stick out their little butt and do a cute face. No concept of maybe what a nightmare they are standing in front of or an accomplishment they are standing in front of. Here's something really famous, but here's me in the middle of something really famous. Look at me, everybody. Look at me. I'm the work of art. What happened and what is going on? Didn't let it ruin my vacation. Did not let it ruin my experience of Italy, but it came close a couple times, man. I just could not believe the level of self-absorption and vanity. Here's the most famous thing in the world. I'm going to be famous standing in front of it. I'm more important than the statue of David. And I understand there's a level of hypocrisy here, okay? I understand you may have some cognitive dissonance because 90% of my podcast artwork, my episode artwork, is selfies. All right, I get it. Not the same thing, okay? That is for the purposes of my podcast. And I even took a couple selfies early on in the trip. I was gathering potential podcast episode art. But once I got a look at these people who couldn't care remotely about what the thing is, not taking a second to consider the Roman Pantheon, the dates to the 1st century BC, and it's just in the middle of a neighborhood in Rome. You walk around a corner and then there's the freaking Pantheon with those pillars, those columns, those Roman columns, the real thing, man, not a movie set. Not a movie set. How do they do it? How do they do it? It's 2,000 years old. How do they do it? It's still standing. How do they make this? No concept of that. Just, get out of my way. I need to tilt my hip and do a cute duck face because I'm in front of whatever this old thing is. No contemplation of this, merely contemplation of how much attention I can get for being in front of the thing. And it's sad, man, and it scares me. It scares me for the future of humanity. If everything, is so much reduced to just how much attention can I get? End of story. So let's go to famous places, not give a crap about why they're famous, or be in awe of what should be awe-inspiring, and just get all the attention on me. Look how pretty I am. Look how cute I am. I saw couples doing this too. Look how cute we are. Dude, get out of the freaking way. I want to see the statue. Even in your photographs. Okay? Don't need your head covering up the statue of David. Need you to move aside so I can see the real art, man. And thank goodness you can't take photos in the Sistine Chapel. Because can you imagine some of that stuff? Folks, art, history, come on, accomplishment, architecture, marvel at both the accomplishment and the atrocity of human history. Pay just a little reverence to the people who freaking died on the floor of that Coliseum while you're doing duck face and moving your hair around for the perfect selfie. Come on, man. Is this what it's come to? And am I just as guilty? I stopped taking selfies. Once I got hip to this and began to see it and saw the extraordinary vanity of it, I'm like, I can't do this. Even for podcast cover art, I can't be seen to be doing selfies in front of, you name it, the Duomo in Florence. Can't do it. It just, I don't know, maybe it speaks to an even deeper vanity on my part, man. But if this is the way the world is now, and if this is what we value, we do not value the freaking statue of David. We value my face in front of the statue of David. We're on a slippery slope, man. And I don't know what to make of that. I understand the tendency, but the fact that, the goal seems so much now to just be a quote-unquote influencer, whatever that even means, and to be seen, and to be acknowledged, and to be celebrated, and to look pretty, and to look cute, might delete later. It was just, when you're somebody like me, and you have a certain reverence for history, and you have a certain reverence for art, I'm not trying to make myself feel superior, but when you approach something like the Roman Pantheon, or the Roman Forum, or the Coliseum, or even the Trevi Fountain, with a certain reverence for what a marvel it is, the Coliseum held 80,000 people. And structurally, it's fundamentally the same as modern stadiums, all right? You splash a little paint on it, it could be your football stadium. Like, it's unreal. The architectural marvel that is the Coliseum, quite apart from the intense history that happened there. I walk into a place like that, I try to find myself 2,000 years back in time. Hard to do at some of these sites because there are so many people. There's a lot of distraction. Your personal Wi-Fi gets kind of divided up a little bit. Hard to do. But I hold such reverence for these places. To walk in and see so many people just using them to generate attention for themselves is disappointing to me, and I don't understand it. And I had to be restrained a few times from getting really angry about it and then feeling smug and superior. Then I'm not one of those people, but then maybe I am, because right now I'm sitting in a room in my house talking to myself, and then I'm going to put it on the internet. So, maybe this is the audio equivalent of a selfie, and I hope that it doesn't come with the same sort of self-absorption that I witnessed out there on my little trip to Italy. But man, when you get past that, Italy, man, I've never been before. And we decided, since I did not go to Europe on tour this fall, we thought, well, hey, why don't we just go anyhow? We've not been to Italy. We haven't done my wife and I, a proper vacation, like an active vacation in a long time. We spent quite a few times, we've gone quite a few times to resorts. We're very fortunate that we've been able to go to the Caribbean many times, lay in the sun, lay on the beach, drink a pina colada. Resorts, we love resorts. We haven't done an actual active trip since we did my First World War dream trip back in 2008. So it's time. Let's go to Italy, man. And It is profound, especially if you are a history person. It is just profound to be in Italy. You know, if you study history, so much of what you study is either Roman or is a product of the Roman Empire. I mean, it colors everything from about year zero. About year zero on, you know, the Roman Empire, there's shades of it everywhere, you know? England is full of Roman history. You know what I mean? It's everywhere. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in these places and it's profound. I have had two, what I would call kind of stunning historical moments in my travels. Two that really come to mind. The first was in 2008 when I was driving into Arras, France. We were there to do World War I battle sites, northern France and in Belgium. This is the dream trip for me. You know, if you've been listening to the podcast for any length of time, you know that the First World War is my historical hobby horse, right? So I've dreamed of this, and I have been fascinated by this history and these sites since I was a little kid. So we're talking, whatever, like 30 years. I had been kind of obsessed with this. And then we're driving down the A1, I think, in France, and then we take the exit ramp off towards Arras, which is kind of the heart of that part of the front line from 14 to 18. Arras, France, about 20 minutes, half an hour from Vimy, you know, proximal to the Somme, proximal to Ypres in Belgium. Arras was a nerve center for Allied operations in that part of the line. And so that's where you base yourself, you know? So we're driving into Arras, and I'm a little freaked out because I'm driving a standard and I'm not good at that. And we've just flown and we've just taken a train and we've had to struggle to rearrange a car rental. Like, it's been a bit chaotic, man. And then I'm freaking out and I'm driving on the highway into Arras, still trying to get used to the notion of this car. And it's all just farmers' fields, right? And then I happen to look to my left. Dumb luck. I look to my left and there's a little tree on the edge of this farmer's field, and beneath the tree, it's about a dozen white headstones. And I recognized them immediately. That was a tiny First World War cemetery, of which there are hundreds, maybe thousands, dotting that part of France and Belgium. You know, they're everywhere. Just a little cluster, a little enclave of headstones. And I saw those, and I recognized what they were in passing, and just a shock went through me. Just a tremor went through me, like, whoa. That's it. That's the real thing. I'm here. I'm seeing this for real now. And that has stayed with me ever since. That was 2008. That was my first interaction with the real history in the real place. And I saw that and it was like, dude, it's for real now. Well, I had a similar experience in Rome. The first day we were there, we took a red eye from Toronto to Rome, flew direct. And then you arrive in Rome and it's morning, and so you begin the day. You know, you try to sleep on the plane. I'm not very good at that. You arrive in the city in the morning, you get to work. You know, when I've flown over to Amsterdam to begin tours, you fly the red eye, you arrive in Amsterdam in the morning, and then you immediately are driving to pick up gear and heading to the first gig. There are no breaks, there's no stops. You're just in it, man. And then you find your way along for the next 6 weeks until suddenly you're back home again. So we're first day in Rome. We're walking. We averaged 15 kilometers a day on foot on this little trip, man. Did a lot of walking, and that's good because we also did a lot of eating, you know what I mean? And Rome is all hills. Rome, I think, was built like on 7 hills. And so everywhere you go, you're walking uphill. Like I was remarking all the time, how are we walking uphill again? Which we were. It's always uphill. Even when you're going downhill, seconds later, you're going uphill. So like they were hard kilometers too, man. So we're walking towards a pizza place, a specific pizza place, because if you say a pizza place in Italy, that's like weed shops in Canada now. Everywhere you look, there's one, right? We were looking for a specific pizza place, and we're just walking, uphill. Hey, there's some ruins over there that are 2,000 years old. What? So we walk, and we come to an intersection, and I just happened to look to my right, and maybe 6 blocks away is the Coliseum. And I just stopped in my tracks, and I was like, that's the Roman Coliseum. We didn't know where, we hadn't had the city figured out at that point. I still kind of don't. It's a big city, Rome. European cities are weird too, okay? European cities, for the most part, especially the ones that have remained really, really old, they're not laid out like North American cities. We have downtown and the suburbs. European cities tend not to be laid out like that. They may have in the smaller places, like a central town square. Okay, that's cool. But European cities tend to be laid out just in neighborhoods. Neighborhood. And they're all the same. You know, you just kind of walk through and it's just this huge mash of neighborhoods. And they tend not to have like a central downtown. Some of them do. All right, some of them do. But a lot of them don't. And so you're just wandering and you're just in the city. Everywhere is the city. Everywhere has shops. Everywhere has restaurants. Everywhere has whatever. They tend not to be that centralized. And so it was in Rome. But it's hard to figure out a city like that because you don't have a lot of reference points. It's like, well, downtown is there, so we must be here. It's like everything's just everything. Looking down the street, not expecting to see the Roman Coliseum, and there it is. And it was the same thing as seeing those headstones. It was like, whoa, we're here. We're seeing this. This is real. That is the Roman Coliseum right over there. Profound, man. Really, really profound. And I don't know how to even enter into this topic. I know I've done 20 minutes already, but it's hard to know how to present this. 10 days in Italy, all right? We did 3 days in Rome, took the train. It's about an hour and a half to Florence. 4 days in Florence, you know, the heart of the Renaissance and Italy's art capital. And then back to Rome for a day and then flew home. And it's like, how do you recount that? You could do it chronologically, I guess. And is that useful? I don't know. It's hard for me even now to categorize all the stuff because there's so much stuff. There's so much stuff. You know, if you go to Rome, there's so much to see. And my observation is that there are kind of two Roman histories. There is ancient Roman history, right? Roman Empire stuff. That's your Coliseum. That's your Pantheon. That's the Roman Forum. And so much of this history was buried for centuries. Like a lot of ancient Rome is buried beneath layers of other Romes that were built on top of it. So you can be walking down the street, and then all of a sudden you'll just look, and there'll be a giant block-sized hole in the ground, and archaeologists down there. And you just sort of look down on them, and there will be old columns that have fallen over, and archways, and they will be unearthing, quite literally de-earthing, history from 2,000 years ago. It's like, oh, we found something. We found who knows what. And so you just kind of stand there and marvel. Like they're unearthing. The whole city is underneath you. And so these pits are everywhere. And you just marvel. Like, wow. We're standing on who knows what that's beneath us. And you have a reverence for that. Unless you're Mussolini, who, you know, carved all roads to his personal office through that stuff, didn't care. But that's Mussolini, man. So there's the ancient Roman history, which is of primary interest to me. And then there is what you might call papal Roman history. There's the Roman Empire, and then there's the Catholic Church. And at a certain point in history, those two merge together. But they're very separate at certain points. And the cool thing for me was definitely ancient Rome, man. Now, I'm going to recommend to you, if you want to see the Coliseum, if you want to see the Roman Forum, if you want to see the parts of ancient Rome that have been unearthed and preserved and are accessible, you couldn't see this stuff for hundreds of years. They didn't even know it was there. Like the records, a lot of this stuff were lost in the Middle Ages, man. And people kind of turned their backs on it. And it was just buried over with new stuff. So you go and look at a Roman building that they've uncovered that could be how many stories tall? I don't know. These are marvels of architecture, man. And then you can just see a line across the face of the building. Well, that was the level of the earth for how many hundred years? And then above it, there'll be another one. Well, apparently they built on top of it, and you'll just see them. It's like the strata. It's like rings on a tree. You can just see and it's way above your head, you know, where the ground was at a certain point. And they've excavated this, and so you can walk from the Coliseum right to the Roman Forum, where people used to gather and just share the news and talk and stuff. And then down into these buildings that used to exist there. They were temples, they were whatever. There's a spot where Julius Caesar's body was burned after he was assassinated, Et Brute. This is real, man. This happened. This is not theoretical. This is real, and you can stand on the spot and look at it. It's freaking mind-blowing. And I was trying real hard. I have an ability sometimes to be able to just kind of see and sense what it was like. Very tough to do with so many hundreds and thousands of tourists around. And this is why I recommend for certain sites that you book tours, okay? The Roman Coliseum, the Roman Forum, these things are ticketed, all right? You can't just walk up. These are ticketed, and so they have what they call skip the line tickets. Because if you just show up, well, I'd like to see the Coliseum today, please. There might be 300 people in line for tickets. It's going to take a long time. But if you book a tour, what happens is you'll gather with your tour group, and that could be, 20 people, 40 people, just depends on the tour. And they'll give you a little headset, and you'll have a tour guide, and the tour guide will furnish you with tickets, and you literally skip the line, man. You go past the line and you go in with your tour group, and then it's really cool because you get some information. So you can go into the Roman Coliseum, 2,000 years old, gladiators, the whole freaking thing, man, the real deal. It is a marvel of ancient and modern architecture. Our stadiums are based on it, man. 80,000 people in there, And you just see these walls that are still standing, and then you begin to understand because your tour guide tells you, well, you know what? This thing was actually covered. There was a cover on the Coliseum, and all of those little archways by the hundreds that surround this structure had statues in them. And you can begin to picture this, and then they'll show you like artists' renderings of what it actually looked like. And you can put yourself in there, and then they'll lead you in, right? And you're just looking up at these columns and these arches and these walls, and you're like, are you kidding me? I gotta get a selfie here. Then they lead you in, and you can stand overlooking the floor. If you know anything about the Roman Coliseum, there was a floor, and then trapdoors. Trapdoors everywhere, and underneath the floor of the Coliseum, there's a lot going on. You just see hallways, little areas, and they would like pop up a tiger and just jump on a guy or whatever. They used to have hunting exhibitions in there. Never mind any of that, as long as I've got a cute selfie with it. You know what I mean? It's mind-blowing, the blood that was shed in that place and how horrendously bloodthirsty Roman society seemed to have been, We're not that far removed of it. You watch UFC, they are the modern gladiators. Not that far removed, man, especially the early UFC where, there's kind of no rules at all. I don't think anybody died and there were no weapons, but, we're not that far removed. We're not as civilized as we pretend we are. But you can go and stand there and you can kind of understand how this worked, the underpinnings of it all, and you just marvel at the architecture. They built an 80,000 person stadium, and it was the center of Roman entertainment, all right? So you do that, and you walk out and you're like, I can't believe what I just saw in there. And, the Coliseum was cool too. And then you walk along and you walk up to the Roman Forum. All these pillars, columns, the real thing, man. This is not a movie set. These are the real thing that have been preserved. And then you walk up and you see all this other stuff, and you can imagine in your mind, there's a huge palace overlooking all of this where who knows who lived, some probably a Roman emperor. At some point, you go look at that. Then you walk down and there's gardens, and then into what was ancient Rome. And you can begin, if you use your imagination, to put it together. And to see all of this is really stunning, but you got to get a guide. You got to book a tour. We booked several tours for different things, all right? Seemed like the smart way to do it. If you're going to Italy for the first time, and there's just certain history that you got to see, okay? If I go back to Italy again, I probably won't even go to Rome. I will go to the countryside, My favorite part of the whole trip, apart from some of this profound history, was the Tuscan countryside, which is magnificent, you know? The wineries, the vineyards, the scenery, these ancient towns, medieval and beyond. Really, really pretty. That's where I'd go. But if you're going to Italy for the first time, there's stuff you got to see, you know? So join a tour for the Coliseum. Join a tour for the Roman Forum. Join a tour for the Vatican, all right? This is the other Roman history. There's ancient Roman history, Julius Caesar, and there is papal / Renaissance Roman history, which comes much, much, much later. Well, around 300 AD, this begins to happen, all right? The Emperor Constantine. But jump ahead to past medieval times into the 1500s, and you get things like St. Peter's Basilica, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Vatican is actually a country, all right? Vatican City exists within Rome, but it's technically a different country, the smallest country on earth. And its ruler is Papa Emeritus IV. We booked a tour for that too, because it's the same freaking deal, man. If you just go to get tickets for Vatican City, you could stand in line all freaking day, but you join your little tour group, you skip the line, and in you go. And there's some really curious things in the Vatican Museums, okay? There's two things that you notice. One thing in particular that I noticed right away about Vatican City and St. Peter's Basilica and St. Peter's Square and all of the art that's in the museums, which is stunning. And you look at it and you think to yourself, you know, some of this money might have been helpful for the poor. Not to be cynical about this, man, but if you stand in St. Peter's Basilica and look around and think of the incalculable wealth that created it, sustains it, and is wrapped up in its value, and you think, guys, could have bought some clothes here. Could maybe have helped out in Africa with some of the famine. With a few of these statues you got here, the wealth is extraordinary, and I feel like it shouldn't be for a religion that, you know, praises feeding and clothing the poor, etc. Like we're talking palatial here, man. There's some curious stuff in the Vatican Museums from a purely historical perspective. Now you walk in, and there are just rows of ancient statues. They're just everywhere. And what a lot of them are statues of pagan gods that have been pilfered by the papacy over, you know, the how many thousands of years it's been? 2,000, I guess. And they went around just gathering up all the statues of antiquity, anything that was pre-Christian, anything pagan, they grabbed it. We'll take that. Why did they take that? Why did they keep those statues, and why do they have them on display? Well, they're kind of trophies, man, according to at least one school of thought. You know, you go into a hunter's house, and there's the heads of all these poor animals that they've killed and put on display. So it is with the statues in the Vatican Museum. These are trophies. Our God is real, and your gods are fake, and we have proof of that because our God has all your statues in his museum. We have all your heads in our freaking museum. So we win, all right? Our God is real. Your pantheon is not. Something like that, right? So you walk around and you see all the statues, and you're like, that's weird. You know, this little trophy case they have. And this statue, that statue, the other thing. And then you walk, and the ceilings in this place are just stunning. And these tapestries and these things that are worth fortunes, man. And you can't take a lot of time to enjoy them because you are in like freaking sardines. You know, the Vatican is making a mint just off of ticket sales, you know? But it doesn't matter because you're there to see the Sistine Chapel. It's the only reason you're in the place, man. You're there to see the Sistine Chapel, which may be the ceiling of which, painted by Michelangelo in the 1500s, is maybe the greatest collective artistic accomplishment in human history, all right? Michelangelo wasn't even a painter, by the way, all right? He was capable of painting, but he hated it. He was a sculptor. You know, he had to be almost coerced into doing the Sistine Chapel ceiling, which took years, by the way. The Pope went to him and said, hey, Mike, got this chapel. want to paint the ceiling up, want to do something pretty spectacular because, hey, I'm the Pope, and I want you to paint it. Michelangelo's like, dude, I'm not a painter. I'm a sculptor. Not interested. Don't want to do it. And this went back and forth many, many times until the Pope twisted his arm enough. Michelangelo, who was kind of a dick, actually, not a pleasant human being at all, loner, just wanted to work on his sculpting, you know. Anyways, in he went, and over the course of years, painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which we all know is a breathtaking accomplishment. And you're not allowed to take photos of it, because I can only imagine the people lining up for selfies, you know, right underneath God's finger, almost touching Adam's finger, you know, in the middle of the ceiling. And paying no, you know, attention or respect or reverence to the art itself. Just me being seen in front of the art. That's what people I gotta see here, man. You're in the Vatican Museum to see the Sistine Chapel. And I gotta tell you, my observation is that Italian security guards, whether it's at the Sistine Chapel or at the Museum of Modern Art, where I got into a certain amount of trouble, do not screw around, all right? You walk into the Sistine Chapel, photos are not allowed. Why are photos not allowed in the Sistine Chapel? Is it because the flash might damage the paint? That sort of thing? No. Do you want to know why? I'll tell you right now. The reason you're not allowed to take photographs in the Sistine Chapel is because the image rights to what's on that ceiling belonged, until very recently, to the Nippon Television Network Corporation of Japan. That's right, Japanese television owned the image and reproduction rights, and so if you took photos in there, you were risking a lawsuit for copyright violation. And that, I believe, has ended now, but they maintain the ban on photography. So there you have it. So you get in there, there's 8 million people in there too, but a kind of hush falls over the place, and you break your neck staring way, way up at all of these individual panels of scenes from the Bible and from the creation and, you know, development, I almost said evolution, of humanity on that ceiling, painted painstakingly, laying on his back on top of scaffolding by Michelangelo. And you just stand there in a kind of awe. And you're not allowed to take a selfie, so you have to actually acknowledge the freaking art. And that's why you go to the Vatican Museum. But you got to take a tour. You know, do it in a tour. You get a lot of information, skip the line, get in there faster, you know. Really breathtaking. But what was fun for me, I mean, it was amazing to see that stuff. Don't get me wrong. We went to Florence. It was amazing to see the Duomo, which is the big cathedral in the heart of Florence. A breathtaking. Again, though, the wealth. The thing is, a lot of these cathedrals were financed by the wealthy people, all right? For many, many, many centuries, Italy was just a series of city-states, all right? You know, Florence was its own state, as was Pisa, as was Venice, as was Rome, as was Verona, whatever. They were all just city-states. You know, they were not connected politically. Part of the Roman Empire, but then the Roman Empire collapsed and that territory was largely taken over by the papacy, so the Pope became kind of the emperor. But these city-states existed, and they were all in competition with each other. They were all quite literally fighting wars with each other. Those wars continue now in Serie A and the lower levels of Italian football. But go back 500 or 600 years, and they're actually fighting legit wars. You know, Florence is trying to take over its territory, and the people who run Florence, who are also fighting each other. You know, you walk around Florence, and there are medieval towers everywhere. And these towers were built so that families could protect themselves from other families. There were like micro wars happening within the macro wars. But one of the things you wanted to do was, in your little city-state, you wanted to flex your muscle by building the biggest, most gaudy, elaborate cathedral that you could. So 600 years ago, 700 years ago, that's what the rich people are doing in these cities and in these city-states. And so you have these magnificent cathedrals that were built by rich people who were basically flexing. They were kind of the selfies of the day. Florence is the best city because look at this freaking cathedral. Look at how wealthy we are. Look at what magnificent architects we have. So these became flexes. And so they exist everywhere, And it's great. You go look at the Duomo in Florence. You go look at the Statue of David and man, it's the same deal. Take a tour. Take a tour of the Academy Gallery, all right? Skip the line, but there's going to be zillions of people in there. And it's totally worth it, by the way. It's a very, very small museum. There's hardly anything to see. You walk in, there's like a room with some statues and paintings. You walk through that, you turn the corner, and then it just opens up. And way down the hall at the base of a big dome at the Academy Gallery is David himself. Statue of David used to sit for many, many happy years, was actually outside in the big square in Florence in front of, the Medici family who built everything and owned everything in that part of the world at a certain point in time. Built this palace because they ran everything and they had all the freaking money. And they took the Statue of David and put it in front of their house. For a long time, Statue of David was in front of their house, in the square in Florence. They moved it to the Academy Gallery in the 1800s. And you walk around the corner and you see it in the distance and your jaw hits the floor. It's not Vegas. It's not a fake David in Vegas. You know what I mean? It's the real thing. And you just stand in front of it in awe because it's magnificent. And it is an unbelievable accomplishment. And if your whole raison d'etre is to take an effing selfie with it and put it on Instagram for likes, you're missing the point. For me, though, a lot of the fun stuff was the unexpected history and the off-the-beaten path stuff. For example, in Rome, we did a food tour. Got to do a food tour. All right, I'm a history person. My wife is a foodie. I'm going to the Forum and the Coliseum. She's doing a food tour. So we meet our tour guide in this little square, and there's a statue in the square. And it's this tall, it's a man, very brooding, head bowed, kinda. Well, maybe he's looking forward. He's got like a cloak on. It's very dark looking, very sinister. I'm like, what is that? And the food tour guide tells us about the statue. The statue is of a cat called Giordano Bruno. Giordano Bruno. On the spot where that statue stands in the year 1600 was burned at the stake on that spot for heresy. Who was Giordano Bruno? He was a philosopher, a mathematician, and hermetic occultist. He was a thinker and a pantheist. And I gotta tell you, one of the worst things you could be, at the peak of papal rule of Rome and Italy, was a pantheist. This dude had whacked out heretical ideas like, the stars in the sky are probably suns with their own planets. And the Earth is probably not the center of the universe. And a lot of those planets out there might actually have life on them. All of this went pretty heavily in the face of Christian theology and the prevailing mores of the time, at least among the ruling class who were Catholics, all right? So this dude was a hardcore heretic and would later become kind of idolized as a martyr for science. This dude was a scientist and a mathematician, and he believed in multiple gods, and that's not something you were allowed to believe in those days. And in certain parts of the world, still aren't. So they convicted him of heresy. They burned him at the freaking stake in the year 1600, right in that square where the statue stands. So you ask yourself, why the statue? All right. Eventually, papal rule of Italy fell apart, and the Kingdom of Italy was established, all right, in the 1800s. And when the grip of the papacy was loosened, it became much easier to come out in opposition to Christianity, Catholicism, to the whole freaking thing, all right? And so the people who were against that, You know, they needed their own little pantheon of heroes, and they settled partly on Giordano Bruno as the martyr for science. So when the papal grip loosened and the Kingdom of Italy was established, they came along to fly in the face of the Vatican and erected this statue to Giordano Bruno, the philosopher, the scientist, the pantheist, the occultist, the scientist. And they faced his gaze directly at the Vatican. How defiant, man. And I freaking loved it. You know, had I not had a tour guide, I wouldn't have known that story. You know what I mean? Take a tour for that reason. You get a lot of really good information. You know, the person who led our Vatican City tour is a professional archaeologist. Gonna tell us a lot of things, you know, a lot of really good information. So I loved the story of Giordano Bruno. And then there's another place called the Crypt of the Capuchins. Crypt of the Capuchins, also in Rome, is a place where they made an art installation out of the bones of 3,700 Capuchin friars. All right? This is as macabre as it gets. You know, you walk through this. This is like a Catholic. They're Catholic friars. They're Franciscan, I believe, monks, the Capuchins. They still exist. They were around for hundreds of years. And they were moving from place to place, and they had all these remains with them. And so they settled into this, I guess, monastery, I guess cathedral, temple, whatever you want to call it, in Rome. And they built, one of them built this incredible display of the remains of these friars, these monks that they had with them. And so you walk in and it's just like a room of skulls and then a whole body, you know, skeleton in the real deal monk habit, the robe, the belt, just laid out there, you know? And the next room will be a tribute to something else. It'll be hip bones. I don't know. It'll be shoulders, femurs, more skulls. Really macabre, but utterly fascinating. It reminds me very much of the Sedlec ossuary in Kutna Hora, Czech Republic. We played a gig in Kutna Hora, Czech Republic, and the Sedlec ossuary is exactly the same thing. It's the bones of 40,000 plague victims turned into an art installation. Macabre as all heck. Really, really fascinating to see, you know? And this doesn't turn up on your list of things to do and see in Rome. You know what I mean? Not allowed to take selfies in there, and that would be interesting, wouldn't it? But another fascinating thing to go and see. And there was one in Florence, too. I mean, we did the big highlights in Florence, and we had our tours scheduled and whatever. And then we're walking around looking at off-the-beaten-path things to do in Florence, and some distance ahead, up a hill, of course, there was something called the Museo Stibbert. The Museo Stibbert was created by this really, really wealthy art and artifact collector in his mansion. He went around the world buying up and collecting armaments and armory from ancient times until, I don't know, maybe the 1800s, from cultures all around the world. And he built this museum of ancient armory and weapons. And we're like, oh, we got to go see that. That'd be interesting. And we go in and the place was freaking fascinating. Just rooms full of armor on display. Real stuff from like 1480. You know, this iron stuff or whatever it was made out of. And you touch it and you look at it and you're like, what? People tried to fight in this with the little slits where the eyes are. You know what I mean? And they wore this stuff. And then just a room full of medieval swords and weapons. And then there's a Japanese exhibit all full of samurai armor and samurai swords. And then there's like an Ottoman one or a Turkish one. And you just go around looking at this armaments, and they're amazing, and they're pristine. And you look at some of the weapons these cats were using, and you're like, man, it was heavy back in the day. It was heavy back in the day to fight one of these guys. And then there's a room where on display are like 8 horses, not real ones, 8 horses, full size, kind of on parade in 2 rows of 4, upon which are knights. Knights in full, real deal armor, period armor. The real thing, though, man. This is not costumes. This is the real armor with like lances and swords. And they're in a column together marching. And all around the walls of that room are just lances, swords, helmets, pristine, all of it. really, really fascinating, man. And I got in trouble. I got in trouble in the Museum of Modern Art, which, by the way, is not worth visiting no matter how bored you are. And I got in trouble at the Museo Stibbert because I saw, I know, a great selfie opportunity for the purposes, well, for real purposes, all right? Not to be seen, but for purposes, all right? Something beyond just attention for me. And so I kind of snuck in behind one of the horses and held up my camera, and immediately the yelling started. Italian security people do not F around, man. Immediately, this woman was just on me, just yelling at me in Italian. I got in trouble in the Museum of Modern Art for having a bottle of water that security let me in with. I had to go through the security, like the metal detector thing, and I handed him my bottle of water to do that, gives it back to me, and then I go into the museum. And I get through almost the whole thing looking around going, what is this place, and why is some of this considered art? Gallery art at that. And then all of a sudden somebody's yelling at me in Italian. Like, what? The water bottle. All right. It's like, throw it out. I'm like, where do I throw it out? And she points around the corner, and I walk around the corner, and it's the exit. Are you kicking me out? So I set my bottle of water, by the exit, and then return to look at the rest of the art not worth seeing. And this woman's yelling at me again. She's got the bottle in her hand. She's there yelling at me. I'm like, dude, security let me in with the freaking water, all right? Not my fault. And then she pulls me around and points to somebody's desk in a wastebasket. So I put it in, and I said, grazie, for, correcting my error of my ways here. Like, dude, freaking chill, will you? By the way, your museum sucks. Anyways, this Museo Stibbert is great. So I'm getting my little shot with the horses, getting yelled at. So, all right, all apologies, scusi. Great place, man. Great place. If you go to Florence, see the things, go to the Museo Stibbert. You go to Rome, go to the Capuchin Crypt, all right? Go look at the statue of Giordano Bruno. Interesting stuff is off the beaten path, all right? We also did, let's get way up on time here. We did a day tour out in Tuscany, went to a vineyard, had some magnificent wine, went to Pisa to see the Leaning Tower, and dude, you want to talk about obnoxious selfies? Holy cats. Okay, fine. Leaning Tower of Pisa is very cool. They built a tower made entirely of marble on soft ground. They were 3 floors up on this thing building it, and it's already sinking on one side. You know what I mean? The Leaning Tower of Pisa has nearly fallen over many, many times, but through, marvels of modern architecture, they managed to dig out the side that's not sinking so that it tilts back just a little bit, and they think they can hold it in place for a while that way. But, it's funny thing is, we're 3 floors up on this thing. It's already leaning. We're not going to stop. Nope. We're going to keep building this thing because that's how we do it. And, if you look at some of these cathedrals, some of these amazing pieces of architecture that were built 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, it took 100 years to build it. It took 200 years to build it. You know what I mean? They didn't have cranes and helicopters. You embarked on a project like this, you will probably die before it's done. And the architect will probably die before it's done. And the patron will probably die before it's done. You know what I mean? Just the commitment to a project. It's going to take us 200 years to build this. Can you even imagine that? Can you even imagine that? I can't imagine that. Time was different then, all right? Everything is so accelerated now that we don't get this notion of breaking ground on a project that will take 100 years to finish. Mind-blowing stuff, man. But go to the out-of-the-way places if you can. Tuscany was amazing. We went to Siena. Siena is most famous for the Palio di Siena, which is a horse race that happens twice a year in this little town. Siena is a town of about 50,000 people, broken into 17 contradas, 17 neighborhoods. And they each have their own symbol and flag. And these 17 districts compete in a horse race around the town square, which is more of a triangle shape and not flat, by the way. It starts and it dips down to the kind of city hall building. this huge square, and it takes them, I don't know how freaking long to set up this horse race, which is over in a minute. They do it twice a year. It's the biggest thing in Siena. It's one of the most famous events in Italy, and it's the biggest thing. Like, people come, there's 50,000 people who live in this town, and they will all be in the square to be among this horse race, which is a freaking chaos, by the way. Go to YouTube, look up the Palio di Siena, and just watch some of the footage. Horses win this race with riders not on them anymore. They corner and people fall off, and the horse wins the race. And then the district that won it goes nuts. I can't go and watch. Just go and watch the footage. It's the biggest thing in the world. People are weeping to win the Palio, man. And so we went to Siena. We sat in the town square. We went to see some of the medieval buildings. Beautiful little town. And we went to San Gimignano, which is another just gorgeous medieval city. You walk around for a little bit. You go to the winery. You have lunch. They pour wine, which was magnificent. You go to Pisa. It's like a whole day thing, but it gets you out of the city to see the countryside. Experience some of what they call la dolce vita. The sweet life, the good life. Really, really pretty. Really, really worth doing. So go to some of the out-of-the-way places and book tours. Tours are important. Tours will get you through the lines. Tours will help you understand what you're looking at, give you a lot of information. And Italy, man, I've done nearly an hour already. I've only scratched the surface, really. Ate some magnificent stuff. Everybody, especially in the touristy places, people speak English. You don't have to worry too much about that. There's a lot of people from everywhere. It's very, very cosmopolitan. You'll hear people speaking German, Spanish, Russian. It's an interesting collection of folks. Got to keep your head up. Interesting, though. It's really, really pretty, really, really beautiful. The history is stunning. Food is great. Some of the wine you get into is magnificent. And that's Italy. That's what you know about Italy. But go to some of the off-the-beaten-path things. Take a look at the Museo Stibbert and the Capuchin Crypt, Very, very interesting stuff that doesn't turn up often on your list of things to do. I put out a feeler. I put out a call for questions. Has anybody got questions about my Italy trip? I did it kind of last minute, so I didn't get a whole lot. But our friends Fresh Breath asked me about the flight. Flying is a bit of a thing these days. Staff shortages, whatever. It wasn't too bad. My recommendation, though, is that you fly direct. At a certain point, we thought, well, we'll fly to Florence, and then that way we can quickly get to Venice. We can quickly get to Rome. We could do all of that. But flying to Florence from Toronto, couldn't find a direct flight. So you're going to have to make one stopover, two stopovers. And what that does is add enormous stress to your travel. Because you don't know if you're going to make your connection. You're not going to make this work. You got to connect twice. That is a pain. My recommendation is that you fly direct. You can. In this part of the world, from Toronto to Rome, it's about an 8 or 9 hour flight. Not a big deal. Flew Air Canada. It was fine. They were not shy about letting us drink the wine. I played Angry Birds on the way home for, I think, 7 hours. There's on the back of the seat in front of you, the entertainment kiosk. Games, Angry Birds World Tour, all right? This is 6 levels, and within the levels are 6 screens. 6 puzzles, I guess, to solve with the Angry Birds. I completed the game twice. Wow. That's what I did. Time goes by real fast. I listened to a bunch of podcasts. I played Angry Bird, zippity zip. They fed us some pretty good food. Flight was okay. We also only traveled carry-on, all right? That's my other recommendation. Fly direct, fly carry-on. All right? We're there for 10 days. We each took a little carry-on suitcase. Very much easier to get around. No waiting on baggage. No wondering if your baggage is going to show up, because we know that's happening these days. And then when you get to Rome, very easy. You hop on a shuttle from the airport right downtown to the Roma Termini, the train station. Our hotel was a 5-minute walk away, and then everything from there is a pretty easy walk. Vatican City was nearly an hour, all right, but we were up for it. Again, we did 15 kilometers a day on foot. Get yourself a centrally located hotel. Doesn't have to be that expensive. Hotels are nice. If you get one that serves you breakfast, that helps. Nice croissant and a cappuccino in the morning. And the shuttle, again, from the airport, very, very easy. That's fine. Not a big deal. But travel light, man. Travel lean. Little suitcase on wheels. Very easy to get around the city, get to your hotel. You don't have to lug a huge suitcase around with you. Don't have to wait on baggage. Flying home from Rome. A lot of lines. Just a lot of freaking lines. And then Angry Birds for 8 hours, drink a little bit of wine, eat some food, land in Toronto, and then just more lines. Lines, lines, lines! And that's just air travel. That's just air travel in the modern world. You put up with it because it's the way it is. And it's worth it, man. We park and flew from Toronto. No big deal. Very, very slick. Zippity zip. Can't complain about the flights. Finished Angry Birds twice. Had a question from our dear friend Angelica in Vienna, which I need to return to. She said, hey, what's the best thing you ate? I'm going to say my favorite dish that I had was the penne arrabbiata, which is just like a penne pasta, tomato sauce, garlic, a little bit spicy, very warm. Warm and hot, they're not the same thing. Really, really tasty. Had it in a few different places. We drank so much Aperol Spritz. Aperol Spritz is like the national drink of Italy, all right? It's orange. Aperol is orange with Prosecco, club soda, and an orange slice. And, Angelica also asked, did we experience la dolce vita? Did we experience this Italian concept of the sweet life? A little bit. Hard to do amongst that many people. And, it was a very active vacation. We didn't get a lot of chance to sit and soak it up. The chances we got, we were sitting, drinking Aperol Spritz in the town square, just kind of watching it all go by, Felt that just a little bit. But we weren't in a place, everywhere we went was touristy, right? So we weren't in a place where we could really sit back and experience real Italy. When I go to Germany, when I go to Holland, I go to the Netherlands, I experience in small doses the real place. We're not in touristy places. To a certain extent, we get a look at real life. And I think La Dolce Vita is a real life concept in Italy that we didn't get to see much because we were in tourist Italy a lot of the time. Little glimpse of it though. Penne arrabbiata, had some really magnificent Italian style pizza, delish, pasta, some of the pastries we ate were dynamite, had some spectacular wine, Italian food culture is the real deal. Then finally we had a question from our old pal Ken the Zen, who says, hey, in Italy, is Italian dressing just called dressing? Ken the Zen can always be counted on. Here's the deal, Ken the Zen. Italian dressing doesn't exist in Italy. In fact, prepared or bottled salad dressings of any type don't really exist in Italy. That is a North American thing, man. That is a North American thing. And your Italian dressing, invented in America, so-called because it has Italian kind of herbs in it. Oregano, that kind of thing. So they put in these Italian herbs and called it Italian dressing. Does not exist in Italy. You ask for Italian dressing, they look at you like you got two heads. And if you do have two heads, you should probably be taking selfies. In Italy, if you have a salad, it will be garnished or dressed with a bit of olive oil, a bit of salt. There will not be any of this creamy stuff you're talking about. A little vinegar. Very subtle. They let the flavors of the food come out. They don't freaking dump a whole jar of salad dressing on it. That's America for you, buddy. So no, Italian dressing is not called dressing in Italy. It doesn't exist in Italy. And there's your trivia for today. That's as far as I have the strength to go right now, kids. I've already done over an hour. I keep intending to make these episodes shorter, but there was a lot to talk about. And there's more to talk about. I just don't have the time to do it today. I will tell you that there is a Patreon page for this podcast. Patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. Look, I appreciate you supporting me there. If you are inclined to do so, I appreciate it very much. It helps me cover the costs of this program, which do exist, and it's a better system for me than doing ad reads. I do not want to fill this podcast with advertisements for stuff that you hear advertised everywhere on podcasts. I prefer the Patreon route. I want to thank all the people who have signed up to support me for the low, low price of $5 a month on Patreon. Think of it as a $1.25 tip for every episode I do. and it just helps me along, warms my cockles. I appreciate you doing that. Patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. You can find me on Instagram at JW_Huff. I put some photos there. You can find me on Facebook at The John Huff Podcast. I also put some photos there. I still exist on TikTok at The John Huff Podcast. I don't know if you're living La Dolce Vita right now. Man, we're away from 10 days, and it was summer when we left, and it is fall when we got back. So my breath this morning did not warm my freaking cockles, all right? Gonna split for now. I'm losing my voice, which is not good because I have a rehearsal momentarily. I'm back in the saddle, kids. I hope you have enjoyed the last couple of weeks. Hope you caught up on some past episodes. Drop me a line. Let me know your experiences of travel or of Italy. If you have other questions, please send them my way. I'll be happy to answer them. Go off the beaten path, kids, but if you're not going to do that, book tours. Book tours. It helps a lot. Gonna go now. Gonna shutting up. I thank you for coming this far with me. And hey, I'll check you later. Yeah. Nobody knows the words. You know what I mean? Excuse me. Gotta go take a selfie.